to this, and today I want to zoom out for a minute and offer a bit of an overview about what we're up to in this course. As Madonna said, we're living in a material world, and that has some implications about how we view our life in music. From an early age in our training, the concept of making progress is kind of drilled into us. We practice to make progress. Which means we want to train our fingers and ears to coordinate. We got to play in tune. We want to align comfortably in our bodies with our instruments. We learn repertoire. We learn how to play with others, etc. And many of us have been trained with specific career goals in mind, like the goals of supporting ourselves as a working professional, for example, or training to be a teacher, or really any kind of vocational training perspective can easily seep into our attitudes about music. And then, fast forward, let's say you're a pro or not, but your personal practice at home becomes about creating a product of some kind. And what I mean by that is like preparing for a public concert, say, or an audition, or making a recording to sell, a promotional video, whatever. We're practicing with a specific outcome in mind, a specific result of our work, which will support us materially, or we imagine will be fulfilling in a way our current state of being isn't. The world we've been brought up in is overwhelmingly materialistic. That means that not only do we constantly crave new stuff in the material world and sometimes measure our success by how we can attain them, but more importantly, that our entire view of the world is determined by that which we can see, manipulate, take apart, and explain. Our sciences are overwhelmingly materialistic, all about dissecting matter to explain life. The word science, and I love this, I got this from Alan Watts. The word science has as its Latin root sci, psi, which is to cut, like the other words we have, like scissors or a schism. Science cuts things up to understand its components, and then those bits are also cut up. And the kind of revolution in new science, I would say, or with some scientists, that they're beginning to understand that matter does not act as a container for consciousness, but that consciousness is what creates matter. So this really just puts the whole kind of pyramid of scientific hierarchy on its head. Everything about science is perfectly valid. However, what we're saying is that consciousness is at the very root of everything. It's not an outgrowth of our being here. It's actually what creates being here. And this was expressed perfectly 800 years ago by Rumi. If you're not familiar with Rumi, an Islamic scholar, Sufi mystic, and a Sufi. And the Sufis had these long meditative vigils called zikr, which were entire nights of poetry, song, this kind of spinning dance that you know that the twirlers do, and of course meditation. And Rumi would improvise these poems, these utterances that were taken down by a scribe and eventually translated into lots of different languages, including the English versions by Coleman Barks, which have made Rumi the best-selling poet in the English world. But here's a poem by Rumi, which is a real beauty, which kind of explains something that I'm trying to get at here. And maybe we can put this up on the screen if you have that, Emily. I can't remember now whether I sent it to you or not.
I can share the script document.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to read it as you hear it. This we have now. This we have now is not imagination. This is not grief or joy, not a judging state or an elation or sadness. Those come and go. This is the presence that doesn't. What else could human beings want? When grapes turn to wine, they're wanting this. This that we are now created the body, cell by cell, like bees building a honeycomb. The human body and the universe grew from this, not this from the universe and the human body. What we're exploring in this course is not exactly anti-materialism, but it's more like integral theory. We're acknowledging the value of science and the scientific process in our musical practice. I mean, that's the rigor that I keep talking about. But we're also acknowledging that transforming these parts into art, into expression, comes from a deeper source. We're investigating how consciousness shapes our music and the whole rest of our life. So having said that, today I want to follow up on an idea that was presented at our last session just briefly, and that is experiencing mastery and freedom in small increments. And the issue is expressed well by Janet. And Janet, the story, I've been thinking about it since you mentioned it 2 weeks ago. Janet shared her experience studying with this accomplished jazz player in Chicago. And this teacher had Janet transcribing like advanced bebop improvisations as an introduction to jazz for her. And it's not unusual to encounter gifted players who may not be gifted teachers. Maybe they forgot their early steps, or through some good fortune of birth, they just can't imagine anyone not having these skills. But experiences like Janet's can leave a lasting imprint, a kind of scar, really, that may require a certain kind of healing. It's like being thrown in the deep end of a pool before you can swim. I mean, no loving parent would do that. For most of us, mastery and freedom are developed incrementally. In this course, my goal is to present material that can be embraced at different levels, depending on your past experiences, technical comfort, etc., and then placed in the service of creativity that we invite from beyond. So in terms of how to get the most out of this course, I suggest that you latch onto one of the levels that you find interesting, explore it with curiosity, break it down into small bits with the intention of making it the clay that a creative force can use to make art, to turn into communication, to reveal a facet of you that you may not have known even about yourself, your life experience, something that surprises you, something that delights you. And the smallest glimmer of accomplishment with this is what I referred to in the last session as direct creative experience, and is, I think, the most essential and effective propellant to musical freedom. But to unpack the idea of incremental mastery even further, exploring musical material in small increments, breaking things down to a few notes, just part of a scale, for example, sounds like a scientific process, and it is, until you place that small bit in the hands of your muse to form into something alive. Then that scientific process becomes an integral practice. That's when you integrate an objective truth, let's say the Mixolydian mode, for example, mix that with your subjective experience of it, all the ways you practice it and understand it, and then place it in the hands of mystery. And before we get into the musical part of today's session, I want to present an image that I'm working with in my own practice. Music, the muse, and the musician. Music, the muse, and the musician. Let's start with music, and let's think of the word music with a capital M as undifferentiated creative energy. In other words, it's a pulsing creative force that shapes all of life. It's the energy that breathes life into matter. It rearranges words into poetic insight. It turns notes into melodies. It turns melodies into solace, into healing. It transforms choreography into like mythic journeys. It turns colors into imagination and storytelling. It turns shapes into revelation. It transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. And it's a consciousness that underlies, envelops, and connects all living things. That's music with a capital M. So that is either the deep part of this image or the high part of this image. The muse, we might visualize as a personal star that hovers over us and is a constant and lifelong companion. It has a luminescence, but not of this world. It's like a kind of modem. It's constantly accessible to be called on, and it connects music to the musician. The muse is useful to imagine as a direct link to the love, the power, and the energies that are always there for us. Our personal muse has another essential aspect. It links us to our ancestors. Though a bit foreign to us in our culture, it's common in a lot of other cultures that certain departed souls stay tuned to our lives and serve as guides and comforters. Many of us have this sense sometimes, and I find it helpful to consider my muse as having direct connection to the angels of my life who are no longer here in physical form. And that includes pets, by the way. My son received a message from a cat, a very diabetic cat, that through a psychic that he had been administering insulin to for the 2 years that they were together. And he recently received a message from the cat, which was not profound. It was just like, what's up? just to let him know that, he was there. And then there's the musician. We know them well. We're the ones working on our sound, our facility, our ear training. We're showing up consistently to keep our craft in good maintenance and to even sharpen and expand our abilities. We're musicians. We're also human beings, prone to all kinds of human foibles and weaknesses and accidents and fears and addictions and neuroses, but also aspiration, love, determination, commitment, courage. We're motivated by energies that are both negative and positive. We want to please our teachers, our peers. We may need validation from an internalized parent. We don't want to be embarrassed by our performance. We want to make good money. But we're also motivated by some very, very bright things in the material that we're privileged to work on. We're attracted to beauty, by musical beauty, by the love that we have for this beauty, to feeling musical freedom, to share beauty with people who need it and appreciate it. I realize I'm kind of describing myself here, especially the human weaknesses part, but I know I need help from my muse many times a week and really many times a day. So let's just consider this image for a moment. Music, the muse, and the musician. the cosmic possibilities of music, the brilliant light, receptivity, and generosity of the muse, and the craft and humility of the musician, who is invoking creative direction from the muse and shaping it into personal form. And this is kind of the subtitle of today's session, that is invocation. And I looked this up in a couple of different spots, and I want to read this to you. This was from Britannica. The concept of summoning a muse is rooted in ancient Greco-Roman mythology, where muses were considered goddesses of inspiration for the arts and sciences. They were often invoked by poets and artists seeking creative inspiration. The invocation of a muse typically involved calling upon them through prayer or poetic address, asking for their guidance and inspiration in artistic endeavors. And then I checked out, of course, ChatGPT. And what that had to offer was this. The summoning of a muse is a metaphorical practice rooted in ancient tradition, primarily associated with the invocation of inspiration in the arts and literature. In classical literature, poets and artists would summon the muse through a formal invocation, a literary device used at the beginning of a poem or other work to request divine inspiration and guidance. This invocation was a way to seek the muse's favor and assistance in creating art. And then it listed some key aspects of summoning a muse. Number one is invocation. This is often a formal address to the muse asking for inspiration and support. It can be found in the opening lines of epic poems such as Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, where the poet requests the muse's help in telling the story. Number two, metaphorical practice. In modern contexts, summoning a muse can be seen as a metaphor for seeking inspiration or entering a creative mindset. Artists might engage in rituals or routines that help them tap into their creativity, akin to invoking a muse. And then there was another called personal interpretation. Today, summoning a muse can be interpreted in various personal ways, such as engaging in activities that stimulate creativity, like meditation, listening to music, or spending time in nature. While the literal invocation of a muse is a tradition from ancient mythology, the concept continues to serve as a powerful metaphor for the creative process. So that kind of links this whole concept with the past. And it's interesting to talk about it as a metaphor. I mean, for me, it's not a metaphor. For me, it's a truth. And when I get the me out of my playing, it just seems like my music comes alive. So I want to try this with you. We're going to look at something simple, the Aolian mode, and briefly kind of explore its colors and feelings, and then invoke muse power to make something of it. The Aolian mode. Aolian is more than just like one of the coolest words. I love it when it comes up in Scrabble. But the dictionary defines it as giving forth or marked by a moaning or sighing sound or musical tone produced by or as if by the wind. What a great definition. Giving forth or marked by a moaning or sighing sound or musical tone produced by or like the wind. That's so cool, and it really is a good title for this mode. It's a great clue, this definition for feeling this mode, also known as the natural minor. If you simply play the notes of a major scale, starting on the 6th scale degree, that's the natural minor, the Aolian mode. And let's just check this out. Let's see, do I have this? I think I do. This is the Aolian mode on A, using one of Marcia Sloane's beautiful cello drones. Let's just explore some of the key notes of this mode.
Eugene, we're not able to hear your cello. So I'm sure that that is a sound that is familiar to you. But the character of this mode is influenced by the minor third, in this case the C natural with the A drone, the minor seventh, which is the G natural, and especially the minor sixth, that F natural, that half step between the fifth and the sixth, is a color that I take special note of. It has a kind of medieval dissonance that evokes a kind of moaning or sighing when you use it as an appoggiatura, resolving it at the fifth. Let me demonstrate. Beautiful, right? And it's got a lot of power in there. And it does have that kind of moaning or sighing vibe that the dictionary used to describe the word Aolian. I realize that for most of you this is incredibly familiar, but for those of you who have learned this in a theory class and were never encouraged to apply these colors to your instrument or to sing it, improvising on this is a great way to not only paint the color of this mode in your mind and under your fingers, but a great way to experience mastery and freedom on this level. We're narrowing the range of our play and imbuing this one mode in one key with love, mindfulness, and curiosity. So this is an example of the kind of incremental work and play, and opportunity that over time contributes to a vaster musical freedom. But the point is that you can experience musical freedom with very, very simple means. So this is what I would call level one. But remember, it's not what you play, but who the player is. It's not what you play, but it's who the player is. And we'll get to an invocation in a moment. But first I wanted to mention something else, and that is, it's a quote from Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R, who is a Catholic mystic. And he said this: "The soul and the spirit
tend to love and revel in paradox. They operate by resonance and reflection. The ego, false self, wants to resolve all paradoxes quickly and easily. And from that quote, this kind of evolved into something. It was a conversation I had with Kenny Werner, and that conversation kind of evolved into the following statement. The soul loves slowness as it seeks resonance. The ego loves speed as it seeks reassurance. The soul loves slowness as it seeks resonance. The ego loves speed as it seeks reassurance. I'll be curious how many of you can really relate to that. I know I can. So often in my practice, I've wanted to reassure myself that I was worthy by playing something really fast too soon. And it reminds me of another quote by this great African. I can never remember or pronounce his name. It's something like Bayo Akamalafe or something like that. And he said, "The times are urgent, let's slow down." I do believe that what we're doing, with this kind of work is almost like an act of defiance. And creativity in these times, when we're surrounded in a culture, if you read the news, there is so much anxiety and fear and change in the wind that it can be paralyzing for the artistic and the creative process. So by engaging this way, by really finding this deep peace that we can find through our meditative practices, our mindful practices, as well as working deeply and thoughtfully, even with simple means, are a way to practice a kind of defiance, I believe. And it's also personally so enriching to be able to find peace when our environment is anything but. So we're going to improvise on this mode with the following invocation. And before we do this, I want to suggest that we just take a moment to put a little space between our thinking and our listening for where the music comes from. So for a moment, make yourself comfortable. Have your feet kind of touching the ground. Just monitor your breath for a moment. You can feel your instrument with you. We're going to be improvising on the Aolian mode. It's the A natural minor, the same key signature as C major, except we're relating our play to the notes A. The A is our floor, it's our home. And just take a breath. And we might consider this to be a kind of invocation to inform our play. I know the scale. I know these notes. And although I have personal experience and emotions associated with these sounds, I come to you to guide the nuance, the dynamics, and to create a living musical experience that serves to heal my doubt, to soothe my sense of aloneness, to nurture my heart, and above all, awaken my awareness of my natural-born, intrinsic connection to music. So with your instruments, just give you some space to improvise on this. This will be a drone for a couple of minutes, and then it moves into some rhythm. I'm going to turn off my cello, and you can just play this at home. Here goes. we're going to have some time for chatting afterwards, and I'm really curious how that worked for you. But let's move along for now. And we're going to look at another mode, the Mixolydian, as we move to what I might call level 2. So the Mixolydian mode is the 5th mode. So it's the scale starting on the 5th of a major key. And we're going to look at 3 Mixolydian scales, F, B flat, and C. Now, a simple blues is generally made from dominant chords, which is the chord that the Mixolydian scale describes. And the 3 chords we're looking at describe a 1-4-5 progression of a simple blues in F. And since I added these scales to the modal prep in last session's materials, for now I'm going to assume you have these under your fingers. And improvising over each one separately with a drone or with the play along is what you might call level 1. And that's a great level to pass through, so that you really get familiar with each of these modes separately, or each of these tonal centers separately. It's the same mode, Mixolydian mode. But if you haven't had a chance to do that, don't worry, we'll go slow. And on cello, I love to kind of explore this after I play the scale in root position. I'll kind of explore this over the entire range of the instrument. And no matter what instrument you play, this is a good idea, just so that you have a sense of fluency across a playing range of your choice on your instrument. And again, you can narrow this down to be as comfortable as you can. So for example, if I play the F mixo scale, the F Mixolydian scale,
Your cello's still off, Eugene.
I'll take that set of notes and, for example, I'll say, I want to just get familiar with how my hands feel playing that scale in first position across the fingerboard. So then that same F Mixolydian scale that I just played sounds like this. And you might do that with all the different modes. And again, the invitation here is just to narrow the range of your expertise as you begin to something that you can really comprehend and really integrate, very, very completely before you kind of make these invocations and start making art out of it. And so we're going to put these 3 scales to work in the context of a blues. But instead of a traditional kind of jazz swing or shuffle feel, today I am feeling more inspired with something quite different. And I want to practice this with a beat from Turkey called shiftatelli, a shiftatelli beat. And with this exercise, we're putting these scales into a form, in this case, the 12-bar blues form. And with repetition, this becomes incredibly natural. But learning this is not left to inspiration. This is the rigor, this is the science of integrating a human construction, the blues form, as a form for inspired content. So we work on the form, and then we invoke our muses to fill it with inspired content. But first comes the work of learning the form in the same way like the way through your house in the dark. You feel the form as 3 4-bar phrases, and you feel the harmonies shift as part of that. And there it is. This is the simple blues in F, and we might just play this, actually, along with this groove. This is the groove that we started the music that you heard at the very top of the session, just to get you used to it. And let's just listen to it. It starts with 4 bars of just this drum beat. And let's just listen to that for a second as we kind of integrate this very quickly. Bop, chicka, chicka, boom, boom, bap. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, bop, chim, chick, chick, bop. Right, so you can hear it has a little bit of that 3 energy that we worked on with the vocal rhythms in the first couple of sessions. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, bop, chick, chick, cap, bop, cap, to cap, bum, boom, bap, bop, cap, to cap, bum, bum, bap. So nice. And unusual feel to play the blues in. So sometimes, changing up the wallpaper or going to a different location, going on vacation, can really bring new things out of your imagination. And in this case, this is, playing the blues over a Turkish beat. I think, it's just like I always have my eyes out for, new and different restaurants. I love different qualities of food and always feel like my heart is expanding just by kind of visiting a different country cuisine-wise through their cuisine. But in any case, let's play this this thing, and we'll go like 3 times through the form. So the first time we'll play the scale, and then the second time you can start to just play around with the notes of the scale on your own. Maybe what I'll do is I will play. Tell you what, we'll play the written notation here the first time through. Second time through, we can do a call and response. Third time through, I'll turn off my cello and you can just do anything you want. So here goes. Yeah, that is a Turkish blues. Well, there we have it. And those are the things I wanted to talk about today. And so next, I want to just open this conversation up. Actually, I had intended to begin the session with a conversation because I'm always very curious about how the so-called homework materials are working for you and what your experience with the materials are. Always very curious about that, and you can always let me know in any way through email or carrier pigeon or whatever. And so let's just open this up. You can come off mute, raise your hand, whatever works for you. We have a good amount of time to kind of share our experiences about what happened in the last session and what happened today for you.
Go ahead, George. You can jump in.
Oh, okay. Um, Boy, Rumi, it's worth getting Coleman Barks's book and reading those each day. It's been very helpful to me, I know. Um, I was thinking of other ways that people have talked about um, the process that you describe so well. And one of those is the, the fact that we spend most of our time in analytical thinking, and it's divergent thinking that we're really asking for when we pick up our horn and or our, well, we always call our axe, as we would say in jazz. You pick up your axe, but you don't chop up your cello because you know you're going to get this sooner or later. Um, and the other thing I was thinking of was the philosopher whose name I can't remember right at the moment, but he talked about the romance and the precision of learning. And it's another way of saying the same stuff. And, the word simple, I think of Miles Davis. And one of the reasons he was such an influence on many of us and can still be an influence through his recordings is the fact that he could play bebop up and down all around, but he cut out the notes and he played phrases and it's he used inflection, all these things that we would use in talking, you know, and it's just he's a perfect example of that. So if you haven't listened to Miles much, it's worth it. And he goes through all kinds of different stages too. You can, yeah, enough of my talking.
No, that's great, George. That is really great and right on. Yeah, and there are obviously other examples too of a kind of simple or minimalist approach. I mean, even going back to Louis Armstrong, where you hear some of those early solos, well, he would just take one note and just pound it out with a certain rhythmic kind of authenticity that would make you want to dance, you know. Or one time we were transcribing an Eric Clapton blues solo, and because it was just so cool, so great, I forget the tune. And what we found out was, he was basically just using the pentatonic scales, just the simplest means, but where he put it, how he played it, was just total blues in every way. So, yeah, that's great. Who else?
I wanted to think one more about the minor sixth and that moaning sign description. for me, it really jumped out in that piece, Nina. Da 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 da
Oh
da
yeah,
ya, da.
that's a Brazilian choro, Janinha. Yeah, beautiful.
Um, so, you know, and I'm thinking about how we don't have a whole lot of songs, or I haven't found a lot of songs that have a minor second in them. So that if we think about the scale as a journey, I take off from home, and the minute I leave, the minute I get to, I mean, if we're um, a major scale or any scale, pretty much, except for what lock, we're usually going a major second. We're going a whole step. So we've already taken a stride away from home to get to that whole step away. If we only went a half step, we might decide not to bother to go out at all and just stay home. But once we get to that a whole step, we're on our journey. And by the time we get to the fifth, we're far away from home. We're in the middle of our journey. But that fifth it is a foundational tone of the scale. So it's a reminder of home. I mean, it is tonally where we feel like we've arrived at somewhere. We're at a viewpoint where we can stop, but we're far away from home. So then when we go that little half step more, to me, the sighing, the moaning is the memory of home is far away, but at least the fifth was feeling a little bit at home. So I'm just turning this into a journey. To me, that's the sighing and the moaning. Far away is home, but at least on the fifth, I
Yeah,
felt
Marcia.
I was home.
Yeah, Marcia. That's a great solo on that. And it's just a perfect example of how, with the kind of the slowness that we were talking about, that you really can develop personal associations with every single note of the scale. And that's when you really know the scale. It's not just knowing it intellectually. It's having these kind of psychological associations and experiences with it. Oh, I just love that. That's so good, Marcia. Thank you.
Eugene, Rick,
Hey, Rick.
I need to confess to you all that I'm not a professional musician. I'm really a neuroscientist. And I'm kind of here, kind of as a voyeur, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what. But I know that as you were talking early on in your introduction, Eugene, it reminded me that um, sometimes when I have my hardcore empiricist brain turned on, and I'm ripping things apart, I get shocked by learning that there's something um, that just gets missed there. And when I feel comfortable, particularly amongst my hardcore empiricist friends, reaching out of that orbit, there are things out there that bring. Um, well, I'm not sure what it. This is going to sound silly, but I work in schizophrenia. You know that, and one of the problems is that these folks have problems with maintaining their salt in their blood. So one of my finest hours, I think, was when I was able to persuade a Japanese scientist company, pharmaceutical company, to let me introduce their drug for treating sodium problems in schizophrenia. When I had the opportunity to give him a piece of artwork that a good artist friend of mine did for me, showing me how to paint watercolors with salt. And he just smiled. That was probably the most I mean, the papers were great, the accolades were great, all the public presentations were great, but somehow seeing that smile was the reward of it all. Yeah.
How interesting, Rick. That is so cool. And I want you to know that I thought of you many times as I was working on today's course,
Well,
just
you are,
because I wanted to choose my words about science rather carefully. But I do consider you to be a truly modern scientist in that I think that
you understand the nuances of where the stuff originates.
You're a dear. Let me just say one of the things that I mean, you give me a lot of courage, Eugene, whenever I'm in your presence or listen to your music, and sometimes it allows me to do things like I've sort of made a pledge that from now on all my science papers are going to have an essay written either by the person who is involved in the project or the family members of the person involved in the project, and what something human that integrates all the
Hmm.
data that's being presented. And sometimes when I do that, I just have to put on a little Eugene or Paul Winter or Teresa, and it all just flows so smoothly. Maybe I'm talking nonsense here, but it doesn't nonsense to me.
Well, I'm your choir. If that's nonsense, you're talking to the choir here. So that's great. Thank you so much, Rick. It's
Yeah.
great. Anyone else like to jump in?
Yeah, could I say something?
Of course,
Hello.
Tina.
Hi. I would like to express confusion. Um, my understanding of modes in jazz I think I'm confused. It seems to me that there's a different mode starting on each pitch. If you did a scale up on D, you would be a particular mode. If you did a scale up on E, you'd be a particular mode, and use the white keys, which is so convenient. But what we just did was we did a jazz chord progression where each the modes of each, starting on each 1, 4, and 5 were the same mode.
They were the
So,
Mixolydian mode, but on different tonal centers.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, is that what you do when you play over different chords in a jazz situation when you're
I would suggest that this is a good place to start so that you recognize the scale. You begin to identify the scale that most closely conveys the quality of the chord. So those chords are all dominant chords. That is a seventh chord, root, third, fifth, and seventh, built on the fifth scale degree of a given key. So that the F7, the F Mixolydian chord, the F Mixolydian scale, is built in the key signature of B flat. So there's this is not a full primer on playing the blues by any means, because there are so many different devices you can use and colors you can bring in for expression. But this, I think, is how I begin for teaching myself, as well as with my students. I'm not sure that answers your question, but is it helpful?
It's a good start. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, and you can always reach out, Tina, if something is confusing.
I'd like to build on her question.
Go ahead.
Confusion. So in your example, blues example we just spoke about, there's A flats in there. That confused me because, for building on B flat, so that's where I got confused. What's these A flats doing in here? Does that make no sense? I don't know.
No, of course. I mean, you're talking about the A flat within the B flat Mixolydian scale, right? And the B flat Mixolydian scale is the scale that's built on the fifth scale degree of E flat.
Okay, that answers it, because I
Yeah.
thought we were sticking to the one scale, the two flats,
I see. Right. No, each of those chords is a distinct Mixolydian scale. There are 3 different scales involved in that blues we just played.
Now
Yeah. Sorry I didn't make that clear. Right on, David.
that's been unclear for me for years. The only
I
other
just-
thing I just on the prior exercise of just the A minor, that was very, I don't know, I got something out of that I couldn't even believe. I think it's because the way you played it made me hear all kinds of stuff I've never heard before, and then especially your introduction with the F and how the F brings the sadness in the Aolian. That really did something to me. I've never played it like that.
Fantastic. Oh, that's good to hear, David. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I was just gonna say this is a interesting time for me because I don't have my instrument. I'm on a tour and I didn't realize that they were gonna take my instrument, theirs, but they were gonna take it and ship it to the next show.
Right.
I don't have it this morning. But it's kind of interesting because I just like hummed along
Great.
and it reminds me that like for me, the biggest disconnect is I have all the ideas but like executing
Hmm.
on my instrument the minute I play like something a little bit out of tune or I think it's a major second, but it's actually a minor third, and I just kind of don't get there,
Hmm.
and then the whole idea crumbles because I've heard something different than in my head, and so just kind of a reminder for me to, I mean, obviously grace and all that, but to continue working on creating a better, like maybe more interval training. Um, work on that piece of it of
Hmm.
idea to fingerboard.
Beautiful. Yeah, exactly. And that is so cool when in an improvisation it can begin to point out areas that you want to get better at. You want to focus on in your practice. I talked a little bit about it last week when we were talking this idea about reflection. And when we reflect, that's part of what we do is evaluate the kind of what we perceive to be the shortcomings in our playing or in our ear training or whatever. So that's so cool. And singing it, something happened to me that was really fundamental in my evolution of playing over chord changes. And that was one time I started singing along with my cello. And I started doing it because the drums were too loud. And I just wanted to be able to hear my line, and I wanted everyone to be able to hear my line. So I started singing along in unison with my cello. And what I noticed is my voice could always find those notes that I was hearing. And when I started singing, my fingers would go there too. Whereas before there was a kind of a shortcoming there in that synapse. So I think for me the singing has been so fantastic. So I'm glad to hear you were singing in your space there.
So I just want to dovetail off that. I was with the Waterbury Harmony Singers for a wassailing Winterfest. And so we sang, and it was a lot of a cappella and just wonderful, wonderful singing. And I wanted to keep us on pitch. So I brought a little harp with me. Didn't matter that it was 0 degrees out doing the pub crawl. But anyway, back to what you were saying about finding the notes. I was shocked when I played this song and we ended up changing keys and I picked it out on the harp immediately. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know I could do that. That was really cool. And it was because it was in the ear already. So I just wanted to share that with Caitlin. And then also I wanted to share an experience yesterday. I played at a nursing home um, for a Valentine's Day social. And your muse that you had printed out was so meaningful to me because it isn't about right notes. I know you've said this before. It isn't about perfection. None of us are perfect, but it is about the heart. And so I went in there, and a lot of these patients are, residents are being wheeled in and so forth and so on. So I took the time in the beginning to read all of these Valentine cards that this 3rd and 4th grade class gave to these seniors. And I was so moved by the love, just the love that these youngsters for their elders, right? And so I played, and I had this huge book in front of me, and I just would pick a song here and pick a song there and play from my heart and do this. It was almost like I had no plan at all. Everything that I had planned went right out the window. And really it was because of you, Eugene. I know that sounds, I'm giving you all the credit, but it was reading that muse before I went. It wasn't about the perfection. It wasn't about the plan. It wasn't about, I'd done my homework, meaning that I was warmed up. And so it was really a moment in time. And, when that happens, the tension in your body goes away. And even if you make a mistake, which you always do, it's no big deal. You let it go. And they loved it. So
How cool, Judy! Oh, that's great. That is really wonderful. And reading those Valentine's Day notes, I can imagine how that would kind of just change your frame of mind. And it reminds me of some musicians I know when they open their case, they have inside their case, like pictures of their family, pictures of people who died, pictures of their pets, of their friends, and I get it. Again, it's a way of just moving out of your everyday world and all the logistics you had to get there and all the practicing you've done, and focus on the love that you feel from your community, from your family, from your ancestors.
Mm,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. What a great comment. That's great, Judy. Thank you.
I'll go off the back of that, Eugene,
Yeah,
and say that
yeah.
I play regularly in care homes for people living with dementia. It's what
Hmm.
training and stuff has been about. And I never have a plan. I have a bag full of music that I lug around with me, and then I sometimes use some of it. um, and This time I did bring, though, a speaker, and I don't usually bring a speaker with me, but I brought that to play Peace, Peace. No, this time, first time I played, I did just a drone. And I said, I've been playing for these guys. I have just a small group. It's really supposed to be one woman, but she's hardwired that she wouldn't want to have it by herself. So I have this little gang that have been listening for a year and a half now, I think. So we're really a group. And Rusty is actually I'm just the organ grinder, but they do tend to pay attention eventually to me. And I said, I'm going to try something. And I put on the drone and I just started improvising on it. And I improvise a lot when I play because I'm very trained and have a lot of experience with just, I meet people where they are in the moment. If it goes into a tune, it does. If it's familiar, it is. If it's not, that's fine too. And watching where everybody's at while I'm playing. So, but they really, really liked that. They really, really liked it. It was unanimous. I watched to see how people were kind of working with it and played for a little while because I could see they were in it. And afterwards, I was talking to them a little. We've gotten to a point where some of them are verbal. Some are verbal in an interesting way, including the 105-year-old that I play for. But it was very cool to do that, to use the speaker and to do the drone playing. And I want to do Peace, Peace next time.
Absolutely. No, that's wonderful, Claire.
Yeah.
I love this too, and I love your you're telling us just how meaningful that was, and you
Yeah.
being in the moment and creating music that may be a very kind of personalized prescription for that moment in time, and for those people who are listening. There's something very much of the present moment in that whole thing, which is powerful. And we don't have a venue on Spotify and iTunes for this kind of improvising that we do. But I think it's not only hugely beneficial for us as musicians, but also can be enormously healing and helpful to people who welcome it.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Eugene.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great comment.
I just want to affirm the affirmation along with Judy and Claire. I have to play for a memorial service tomorrow, and I put a copy of the affirmation in my binder with the music I'm choosing. And somehow, and I was reading it to myself. I read it to myself out loud before I practice or play through my songs. And somehow those words, no intention to play well, that was just those were the most liberating words, because I felt like the need to play well was like this whip behind me. And all of a sudden I was no longer looking at what I was doing on that kind of spectrum, bringing joy into your music, listening to the music and finding, letting that direct what you do next, like choosing, like if you didn't know what the next tune was going to be, Judy, you realize your heart was choosing what was right for the moment. And it was such a liberation, those words, no intention to play well. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, really.
I'm laughing right along with you. That's fantastic, Marcia. Thanks.
And the other thing is the song that we begin with, in a sense, that is part of our invocation. Like I made
Mm.
an arrangement of Debussy's Clair de Lune for cello many years ago because it was requested for something. And that starts very ethereally. Of course, at least in it, when a piano's playing it, there's a harmonic orientation. But when you're just playing it one line on a cello, but to me, it just opens up this. It's my invocation to the muse. These sort of
Mm-hmm.
distant
Mm-hmm.
intervals and very slow, and not even trying to be in a regular pulse yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that this idea that along with that we really can invoke through the choice of how we begin, because after that I guess the heart can dictate it, but in many circumstances, but how we begin is can be very
Beautiful.
healing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Wow. Aurelia.
Hi, I wanted to share because a little bit of something that was exciting for me this week, along the lines of all of this. I started doing these workshops with you, Eugene, I think prior to COVID, and it's taken me a long time to feel confident in doing this. But this week I was finally able to take a little sketch in this idea of there aren't any wrong notes, and do a performance for the city council here in San Antonio, and hearing everyone, talk, especially the idea of no wrong notes. I didn't do the performance alone. I performed with other musicians, and a gentleman named Renee Ford, who is a saxophone player from Detroit, a longtime performance artist. And sitting before I had to play, I was working on my sketch, and one of the things he said to me right before we performed really echoed what I hear Eugene saying also is, whatever happens, happens in the moment. And so I just wanted to share that little bit of I guess, joy for me in this entire process, because it was the first time for me doing this sort of thing in public, doing improv and doing something that flows naturally in public, and before
Wow.
I
That
hear
sounds
it.
that sounds like a breakthrough. Congratulations, Aurelia. Yeah. And you've done a lot of work to prepare yourself for that. I acknowledge that. That's so fantastic.
Esther, you've had your hand up for a while.
Oh, I haven't noticed that. Sorry about that.
I
Esther, go
just
ahead.
noticed it.
Oh, that's fine. I have lots of comments. One of the comments I have is that a big thing that's shifted, or that I've been thinking about in the last 2 weeks together with my therapist and working through our materials and my practicing and teaching, is that my cello self is actually okay. It's just getting there. And that's not always the
Hmm.
case. But that like once I sit down, work through the stuff, meditate a little bit, get through my affirmation, get to playing, I'm like, oh, yeah, I could sit and practice. It's all good. And something my therapist brought up this week was our feelings of anxiety or fill in the blank aren't always real to the experience that we're feeling them in. They may be from other experiences.
Yeah.
In my case, job insecurity is a part of that. Not necessarily, like I was feeling really nervous about going and coaching a string orchestra, even though my rational mind was like, you really loved this last time. You're going to be great. You know how to do this. You have the experience. I was so nervous. But once I thought about maybe I'm not actually nervous about this, that helped a lot. That was huge. So that's been a big thing that I've been thinking about. But I have a question for you. because sometimes things don't go well improvising. I had my second show last week with the dancer. It was all completely improvised. And the good part of that for me personally was I was about to go out and the place was completely packed. There were over 100 people there, standing room only. And I just all of a sudden I had been excited and all of a sudden had that feeling of, oh crap, that's a lot of people. And just like, okay, I'm just dropping the needle here, I'm in this space, I'm turning the mixing board down, and that was great. And I went out and I did the whole performance and people loved it, but it wasn't great. Like, I know there were things where I was distracted, I know there were moments where I wasn't engaged. It could have been better. And that's not me being overcritical. That's me accepting that there were some things that could have been better. I know they could have. So I'm curious how you would suggest responding to those musical experiences that are being dropped in the pool, that don't go well, that create trauma or that create unease, and how to respond to them. I have some from years ago, and I have some this smaller one from last week, and I'm curious how you would suggest moving through those from a musician perspective.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that, Esther. That's really moving, and it's also just extraordinary that you're developing that quality of awareness that some of the things that affect your music may not be about the music, whatever, at all. May come from other parts of your life experience. So that's extraordinary. And it's also very common for me when unexpected things happen in performance to drop into what I referred to last week as kind of a reflection mode. And the reflection mode is this evaluative mind, that compares what your intention is with what actually came out. And it's the big win there. For you, I would suggest is that you had that awareness and you were able to keep going. And you said that the audience loved it. So that means that your evaluation of what was going on was probably inaccurate, and that's great news. I think that's always great news, particularly when we have fear and negative evaluation of ourselves. I think we can almost 100% of the time realize that that's based on that's an incorrect deduction. I think it's always incorrect. So you had a moment of reflection in the middle of the concert, which may have suddenly pointed out something in your abilities that you wanted to address and to improve. And that is fantastic. It feels much safer when that happens at home. But that's happened to me too. That's happened in public. And you have to take note of it. And just as you did, keep going. People love it. And you've got your work to do when you get home. You're the musician. You're the musician. Yeah, and we're all in that boat too. Just of continually being, a worthy vessel. I hope that addresses your question to some extent. It's a complicated one. Does anyone else have anything to share? Yeah, George, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, Esther, that maybe something that happens with me too is I immediately would say, oh, gee, it could have been better. And then I think, did I start that performance deciding ahead of time that I wasn't going to do the best I could do. No, I'm not going to
Wow,
do it.
that's quite a
You know,
thought.
if I had thought that, then hey, it worked out just the way I thought. I'm not going to do it. But you didn't start with that intention. You were there to do the best that you could, and you did it. And the other thing is that I'm starting to learn to do this more, is to try to say instead, I I could have done it. I could have done it better. I could have done it differently. Maybe that's another way. It's sort of like being an observer rather than You know, when I said that, I could have done it better. All I could think of was Marlon Marlon Brando, saying, looking down, they got Charlie. I mean, it's just sort of that kind of like, duh, woo, pretty obvious that you did what you could do.
I can't see everybody's windows, so if you have your hand up, I can't see it. Just jump in.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Oh, well, it's nice to meet everyone.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hey, Dean. Yeah, I think this conversation and the feeling behind it is very additive to something I'm hosting tonight in Brooklyn, which is I throw these really quirky jam sessions for artists, musicians, and interdisciplinary weirdos to get together. We call them Motion the Ocean because we always just play like 4K videos of underwater footage. And tonight's theme, actually, I think relevant to one of the comments made earlier, is like a gathering of artists and scientists. And there's always sort of this like yearning to see what would happen if artists could support scientists and vice versa in that estuary zone. And so I think leading up to tonight, it's a very quirky theme. I paint and write a lot, but it's called, because Motion Ocean is called Reef City. It's about like New York City as a bunch of different sea creatures, and what's actually, some things may parallel what's happening in real time with like current world events. Yeah, like you have Elon Mollusk as one of the characters. But anyways, one of the things is in even doing the production for the next 8 hours, I wanted to create a space where it's open enough so people could feel like they could improv, but there's like anchoring beats that are quirky and fun. And I also feel this like resistance in my heart of the tension I always deal with in New York City, because in my main practice, like there's a gauntlet of judgment in the art and high art and fashion world. And just like doing this completely on a pro bono basis so that we could have space to create for people to actually just breathe and have fun and have joy and be quirky and maybe a little sassy. But just trying to figure out the tension of like, how do you create enough space for people to want to jump in and improv some of these scenes and and have that happen. So I find this conversation really helpful, at least in spirit, but facilitating like, at least 15 other artists and perhaps an audience confirmed with 70 people would be really interesting. So,
Fantastic. That sounds like such a great act of creative defiance right there. And I love that phrase, a gauntlet of judgment. That's really good. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Rebecca, while you're here, did you want to introduce yourself to the group too? And
We've had everybody introduce themselves, Rebecca, and we wanted to give you that space today as well. Just take a minute.
oh yeah, anything that I should cover or unearth in the introduction?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm Rebecca. I'm usually based in Brooklyn. I do travel, and my work involves me going to a lot of different communities around the world, particularly working with a lot of indigenous and rural communities. But I always have found gathering with Eugene and the various practices on Saturdays, just going on airplane mode, and except where I'll go on, I'll log on to be very grounding as a downbeat across like all the different places that and amazing communities I get to interact with. And also just for it to be like a very deep anchoring point in the cacophony of sounds. So yeah, that's all metaphorical, but yeah, I'm by profession a social entrepreneur. I work with a lot of indigenous artists and creatives around the world. I do a lot in like the visual arts and fashion world, and I'm a cellist. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Rebecca. Well, that brings us to the end of our scheduled session today. As usual, I'm in no flying rush to to leave. So if people do have more comments and questions, I'm perfectly happy to address those. And let's just give another half a minute of space to see whether something comes up. Well, fantastic. And, we will have the materials from today's session, including these play-alongs that I created, the PDFs, and everything will be ready to access by Monday morning at the latest. And so just with great thanks to everybody who's pitching in on this and being with us, we'll sign off for this week.